Hello all, so I'm excited this morning to be heading again to somewhere that's brand new to me. I'm going down this morning south about 3/4 of an hour, 50 minutes to Ringwood Hall Hotel and Spa, which is near Chesterfield between Brimington and Hollingwood. Probably, if you're familiar, not that far from Chatsworth. I've been booked for Samantha and David's wedding later in the year in August, and I'm excited to find somewhere that looks like it's got, from the perspective of somebody that goes to a lot of venues, a really broad range of options for ceremony and celebration spaces. There's the garden pavilion and Italian garden, as well as loads of different options inside. Now, it's a grade 2 listed 19th century mansion that sits in 6 acres of award-winning formal gardens, and said formal gardens sit inside a further 29 acres of parkland overall. So you've got, for outdoor spaces, the garden pavilion for a ceremony. You've also got the Italian garden with its pergola, and seasonally, it's not up at the moment because it's February, understandably, but there's also a large marquee with its own separate fenced off bit of garden. The garden marquee can handle ceremonies and wedding breakfasts anywhere from 80 to 180 guests, and if you're having a really large party in the evening, has a capacity for evening reception up to 350, or even for external catering and international weddings up to 400. Obviously, capacities for the garden pavilion are a bit more flexible. It's a broad area of lawn. I'll talk a little bit about directions of lighting there when we get there and directions it's facing. I'll be really excited in good weather to be shooting in the garden pavilion this year for an outdoor ceremony. Beyond that, you've got the indoor suite options, the largest being the Ringwood. The Ringwood can accommodate ceremonies and wedding breakfasts anything from 60 to 130 guests, and evening receptions up to 250. You then have the Portland suite, and it can stand alone on its own or be combined with the Chatsworth. I was mentioning Chatsworth is not all that far away. The Portland suite can take a ceremony up to 80 and accommodate a wedding breakfast of up to 50. That said, if you want to extend that wedding breakfast or reception up to 80 as well, it can be combined between the Portland and Chatsworth suites. With thanks to Shamim, the wedding coordinator, I've got access all areas at Ringwood today, just about, with the exception of the Hollingwood suite that's being used for a function. As it happens, it's one of the smaller suites anyway. Its ceremony capacity is up to 60 and wedding breakfasts up to 40. Beyond that, there's also the Cavendish suite, which can accommodate a ceremony of up to 24 and a wedding breakfast of 12. So you've got an enormous range of formal gardens to choose from. You've got the topiary of the Italian garden. You've got some really mature trees. I'm looking forward to looking at some of those for ideas of silhouetting and backlighting at night. I will also be looking at some of the stonework and archways for backlighting and silhouettes when we are shooting in an evening reception. There's the hall itself that one could silhouette later at dusk, and the entrance for things like flowing veil shots. Lots and lots of options, both indoors and out. So I'll be excited to join you there a little later. As for hotel facilities, you're spoilt for choice there too. You've got 12 honeymoon suites to choose from, and for a bit of relaxation and R&R before or after, a spa. Here we've got the front of the hall, which we might come to in the evening. I think this would be a brilliant blue hour shot as dusk falls, in the hour before sunset itself, where we could get your veil billowing under these columns, under the portico here. So Shmeen tells me that this small bar space, the Staveley, isn't typically used at the bar all that much, but perhaps if you've got a large wedding party, it can serve as a breakout space during evening receptions. So with any of these suites today, you're going to have to do a little bit of imagining of what table decor you've gone for, floristry, things like aisles in other spaces, and the floral arrangements that you might have gone for. Here in the Portland suite, we've got one of the smaller suites that's sometimes combined along with others. The Portland suite can accommodate a civil ceremony of up to 80 people, and in this space perhaps a wedding breakfast of 50, or if combined with the Chatsworth suite, up to 80. Here in the Chatsworth suite, you've got a civil ceremony guest capacity of 80. You've got the capacity in here for tables of this sort to be laid out for a wedding breakfast of 50. Or, because there's an adjoining door, if you wanted at the front corner of the building to adjoin with the Portland suite, then you could potentially have a wedding breakfast and evening reception of up to 80 guests. These are a couple of the smaller spaces. So if you imagine the event styling of using a central aisle here for your ceremony, this is one of the biggest, or the biggest, indoor suites. Here in the Ringwood suite, you've got the capability to have a central aisle, perhaps with some material, some stands, some vases and floristry, and your seating alongside. It could then be reset for the wedding breakfast. In the case of the wedding that I'm intending to come and do the photography for later this year, we'll actually be in the garden pavilion for the ceremony and then moving into here for wedding breakfast and reception, unless this becomes the whole day solution in the case of really wet weather. And then it can be set up for ceremony in the morning and reset for wedding breakfast thereafter. As you can see, it's a big space, the Ringwood Suite, so you could have anything from 60 up to 130 ceremony guests in here, as well as moving beyond that figure for your evening reception. Ceremony, wedding breakfast, anything from 60 up to 130. Evening reception capacity in here is as many as 250, and boasts this conservatory space as well. You really would be spoilt for choice alongside all of the outdoor spaces, especially having enjoyed the ceremony in the garden pavilion out beyond there. The library can also be used as a breakout space during weddings. I will go on to show you the structure where the marquee normally is. It's February and it's a seasonal thing, so it's not up at the moment, of course, but we'll take a look and imagine the spacing and how you might use what is effectively the largest reception area, where you've also got a separate sectioned off bit of the gardens too. Here you've got something that would be a wonderful place for a fun pose with your partner or by yourself. If I can't capture a bit of fun or a bit of movement with that, then that's nobody's business, surely. Looking out over this way, you've got the main lawns behind the main hall over there, and you can orientate yourself out toward the garden pavilion, where I know that Samantha and David have got their ceremony booked this year. The great thing about Ringwood is that there's a huge range of options, meaning that if you need to fall back on a wet weather contingency, it's by no means anything of a compromise. It's not a contingency at all. You can imagine in full summer foliage, this tree is going to be absolutely brilliant for the backdrop of some of your images, or to provide open shade while I shoot from the opposite direction but through it. Imagine if I've got some of you standing on the lawn and I'm actually shooting from probably behind that bench, and although that doesn't seem like a likelihood to you potentially, what that provides is open shade. It also provides backlighting and a beautifully haloed hairlight for east and southeast facing light in the afternoon. So the main lawn of Ringwood Hall here is south facing, as all good lawns are, of course. The place isn't set up today like it would be for a wedding fair. There is one on the April the 28th that I'm going to aim for if I can, just as it starts to rain. I'm out here at the moment near the garden pavilion, where you can have one of your outdoor ceremony options. If you imagine that this space has been dressed so that this is the aisle aligned with the opening on the pavilion there, and you've got seating either side, the ideal thing about this being south facing is I'm currently facing just about due east. And as we move round to a 12 noon ceremony, the light will be coming from somewhere around here or toward here as we move toward afternoon, which makes it really ideal, because if bride is coming down aisle on left, and where this topiary is now, our groom is perhaps waiting somewhere around here on the right, that's ideal for me to spend some of my time reasonably close by, but not too obtrusively, somewhere around here, in front of what will likely be the bride's parents sat in the front row somewhere here. The reason that I'm belabouring that detail is that because the light will be coming over here, this makes this spot the most flattering and beautiful for our couple, because I'll be able to backlight them, or at least side light them to an extent that's flattering, whereby there's a haloing and hair light around. There's nothing worse than really bright squinty shots, so I wouldn't be as inclined to be exactly over here. We will do that at some point with the hall in the background, but we'll make sure that we're not having unflattering shadows from a side angle or something like that. The point I'm making is that your photographer is thinking about reading the light and these ideal things, as it starts to spatter with rain at the minute today, so that you don't have to, and get really naturally beautiful shots. Equally, there's no doubting the fact that the rain makes for some really fun shots. If you and your partner want to get under a white umbrella and have me use the flash to freeze that rain, that's a really stunning romantic shot. But that's for you as a couple for a bit of fun. It doesn't get you wet, or at least not too much. It's a bit of fun. It's not, however, something that your whole wedding party are going to tolerate doing, so you do need that indoor backup. And just like that, it's pretty much stopped again, but there we are. Wet weather contingency plans with venues. Make sure that you talk to your venue about a wet weather plan. It doesn't have to ruin things, and it absolutely shouldn't. Ideally, the very least that you need is to know that there's a plan for an indoor space large enough, perhaps at the base of a stairwell, but with enough natural lighting for me to be able to get wide angle large group shots of your whole wedding party and your bigger group and family shots. That's the least that you need in case you have to retreat from inside. Out here, I would very likely use the steps at the end of the southern lawn of Ringwood Hall, or somewhere near the garden pavilion that I've just shown you. What's really good about here is that you've got a lot of big indoor spaces too, potentially the marquee, but more likely using somewhere like the Ringwood Suite as well, so that there's no sense of jeopardy about that kind of thing. So I'm just having an explore here of the secret garden, and coming through this way is where the marquee structure is. Now the marquee is not set up in February, but as you can see, it's a really large space. It's actually the largest of Ringwood's spaces. You could have between 80 and 180 guests for your ceremony and wedding breakfast in there, and still benefit from the private fenced off bit of garden that's included here. especially for your evening reception, where you might go on to use this for as many as 350 guests. Facing back up toward the hall now, with the garden pavilion here, you've got the main lawn over there, and then off in the opposite direction you've got the Italian garden and pagoda. Now, in the height of the summer, out on the boundaries of the property, you might actually find that there's some really nice opportunities for a few shots of you as a couple, perhaps in amongst some of the crops, just ever so slightly on the edge, not annoying any farmers, I hope, but some of that kind of waist level crop shots in the sunshine can be really beautiful too. Now, I forbid anybody to tell me that this topiary would not be just the most beautiful spot to pose a bride and groom on their wedding. I will definitely be making a beeline for this. Now, I'm very conscious that when I'm doing these videos, I witter on and on and on about photography as though that's what the whole day is about. And I need to remember to just make sure and reassure you that I don't want to treat it as a photo shoot. When it comes to beautiful spots like this, I am going to pick a maximum of roughly 3 spots outdoors with a couple of ideas in mind for each, so that at most we're doing half a dozen wow shots over the course of no more than 30 minutes. You want to be enjoying your friends, your party members, and I will give you a notion pre-planning of ideas, not because I want it to be a photo shoot, but so that you can yay or nay what you fancy the idea of. By all means, bring to the table what you want to, or if it's not something that you feel clear about, then take my advice. At the same time, it's about striking the right balance. So if you don't want to take too long, that's perfectly fine. What I tend to say is I will come along at a certain point, and if things are running behind schedule on a ceremony, that is what it is. But that has a knock-on effect later in the day. And if you want a particular sunset shot, then it might well be that you need to think about having me come along. Worst case scenario, we might get to the end of the main course and you might have me come along and whisper, you know, really the light's doing what it's going to do now, and there's no leeway to pop out and perhaps spend that half hour prior to dessert. In a worst case scenario, you of course have got the freedom there to say, no, we're okay, and forego those if you so wish. Or if you really want those beautiful blue hour shots and the timing is such that you've got to, we can nip out and do it, have fun and get back as fast as possible. Ideally, we don't have to make that compromise, because hopefully things will run to time and there'll be plenty long enough gap, especially in the height of summer when sundown is so much later. So one of my clients said to me recently that they'd been looking for work that struck them as a bit different, and I hope that off-camera flash work serves to achieve that purpose to some extent or not. One of the places that I'll be coming come hell or high water, I promise it's the bride and groom's choice, will be this arch after dark. If I can place a flash behind them standing in here and fire a flash, I can fill this archway with coloured light that's gelled and render a complete silhouette of them that will be absolutely beautiful. Colour choice up to them. You will spot from my work and website that I have a penchant for orange, but the last time I spoke to Sam, she'd not settled on an overall colour theme. I imagine she has by now. It's a few months since we had that conversation. So it could be that the colour matches the theme and decor, or even bridesmaids' dresses. So I'm not normally in the habit of speaking to a mirror, especially not for a video like this, but this serves to illustrate the sort of place that your expert eye of a photographer can spot. This is a pretty mundane spot. It's quite dim in this entranceway, and I was about to start giving my spiel on the Balborough suite when actually I spotted this and thought it was worth commenting on. This dimmer entranceway with this big broad window gives a beautiful soft light that will make for the most perfect portrait light on your bride's face. If I just angle up a little bit here like this, so that the focus is on my face here, you can see that. I would then, as the photographer, be angled so that I was out of shot, but very much focusing in on the reflection here. And if the angle allowed, perhaps cleverly having in shallow depth of field blurred out, imagine that my fist and ring here is the bride's shoulder. A beautiful, elegant portrait. The Balborough Suite's one of a dozen options that you've got for honeymoon suites at Ringwood Hall. You've got here something really unique in having a curtained four-poster and this beautiful wallpaper. This is just the sort of thing that I'd love with this warm lighting to use as a backdrop for bridal prep. I must admit, I must check with Shamim whether honeymoon suites are a prep area ahead of your ceremonies or not, but it strikes me that that's likely. You've got this curtain four-poster, which is absolutely beautiful, and I've left the pièce de résistance, if I can use such a cliche, of this amazing waterfall shower in the corner of the bedroom over the most beautiful roll-top freestanding bath.